Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Wednesday, April 16th. Derek VanRiper, Sarris, Jed Lowrie here with you. On this episode, we discuss Major League Baseball's celebration of Jackie Robinson Day. That went down on Tuesday. We're going to dig into player development in the sense of getting timing right, filling your needs as an organization with young players, trying to decide if they're ready, if they can solve their problems in the big leagues. And we planned this show before we knew that the Cubs were going to send Matt Shaw down to AAA, although Jed had an inkling that Matt Shaw might need a reboot when this season began. We'll dig into that in just a little while. We also have a trio of young first basemen putting together great starts to this season. We're going to dig into how they got to this point, what kinds of changes they've made, and try to figure out how sustainable those adjustments might be. I feel like I've been promoted to the big leagues, Jed. I'm wearing AirPods. I don't have two flaps anymore. I don't have the giant headphones I've been wearing for the last 7 years.
I think that's I don't know how to take that, right? Because I feel like the double flap was my signature in the big leagues. So I don't know if that's a direct affront to me or, but I'm happy. I'm happy you've stepped into the 21st century.
I've never thought about the flaps until you mentioned it a couple of weeks ago. I was like, yeah, you're right. It's a single flap league. It's just the way it goes. But yeah, that's how those details go sometimes. But yeah, I do feel like I'm part of the 21st century now. I'm feeling really good. So, of course, April 15th every year is the day in which Major League Baseball honors Jackie Robinson for breaking MLB's color barrier back in 1947. And I've used this day for the last several years just to read different stories, to learn more about Jackie's life and his career. I think every year there's some aspect of his life that I learned something about. I read a great piece from Justin Tinsley of Anscape yesterday about how this year's Jackie Robinson Day has been a little bit different. And Justin did a great job making the connection between Jackie's military service, which I had known about. He was court-martialed and was acquitted. I didn't realize that the timing of the executive order that integrated the armed forces was a year after Jackie's big league debut, right? I just had never really made the connection of that timing in history before. So that was something that I had kind of learned from reading Justin's piece. But, Jed, you had a chance to play on several Jackie Robinson days. And I imagine of the days in which you stop and honor people in baseball history, that has to be one of the most special days, putting on that number 42 uniform.
No doubt about it. I looked forward to it every year. I try to, think about the situations that he was, put into as a man and as a baseball player. And, it overwhelms me sometimes to think about the things that he had to endure to, be ultimately the guy that we will remember as the guy that broke the color barrier. And I just, like I said, it was an honor to put on 42 every year.
Yeah, I was reading a story by Mike Ryoko about his time as a kid in the fans, and he was there the day that Jackie Robinson made his debut in Wrigley, and that's the only park left that Robinson actually played in, and he just had a little vignette. I mean, some of it's just about being a fan and what it was like to be in the stadium during that time, and he ends up getting a foul ball from Jackie Robinson and giving it to or selling it to this black man that was really touched by the moment. But I tend to think a lot about like what it must have been like to be the only black man in baseball. And this thing stood out from Mike Rioko's piece where he's talking about Robinson played first, and early in the game, a Cubs star hit a grounder, and it was a close play. Just before the Cub reached first, he swerved to his left, and he got to the bag. He seemed to slam his foot down hard at Robinson's foot. It was obvious to everyone that he was trying to run into him and spike him. Robinson took the throw and got clear at the last instant. And he was saying, as a kid, I was shocked. That Cub, a hometown boy, was my biggest hero. It was not only an unheroic stunt, it seemed a rude thing to do in front of people who cheer for a foul ball. I didn't understand why he had done it. It wasn't at all big league. And that's just, that's the kind of stuff he had to endure. And that was day in and day out. That was just the first day.
on top, and then, extend that to the verbal, abuse he likely endured, and not likely, like, did endure, right?
Yeah.
And not only was he fighting on the field, he was fighting off the field for what was the right thing. And it's like I said, it really makes me stop and think, and like I said, it just an honor to put that on, to give tribute to a man who means so much to more than the game.
And hopefully a day that will continue to grow in importance each year as we continue to celebrate every year on April 15th. Let's move on to some other baseball news you should know. The Cubs optioned Matt Shaw to AAA on Tuesday. I didn't know you had a prediction going into the season, Jed, but you had some concerns about Shaw's ability to stick right away as the Cubs' primary third baseman. I've seen a lot of people wonder, like, okay, this is a really busy swing. Is this going to work as it is currently constructed? Unless you were grinding minor league video, you maybe hadn't seen Matt Shaw swing a bat in person before or on video before his arrival to the big leagues. He was part of that Tokyo series. And I mentioned he was hitting fifth for the Cubs in those two games, got dropped to the bottom third of the order in the few weeks since then. And we're going to play the swing. If you're watching on YouTube, it's unusual for a lot of different reasons. You visually will see it, but we noticed a few things. Like, for as busy as Matt Shaw's swing is, it's more than 2.5 miles an hour slower than a league average swing in what we've seen so far. We're talking about 88 competitive swings, but just quantifying it, you see feet that are very close together, 19.6 inches apart. League average is 30. 2 degrees closed stance. League average is 10 degrees open.
Yeah, it's
so just
one of the 15th most closed stance in the big leagues. It's one of the 10 furthest from the plate.
Yeah.
So he's setting up further from the plate from anybody, more closed than anybody. And that becomes pretty immediately actually something you can see. He's very closed and very far from the plate. And Tango actually came out with some stuff saying that closer to the plate was good. That almost the closest you could get to the plate. That was almost a linear relationship. It was like the closer you were to the plate, the better. But of course, that's a little bit different. If you're Ellie De La Cruz, who's one of the other guys who's furthest from the plate, Ellie De La Cruz is 6'6". Matt Shaw is 5'10". So he should probably be closer to the plate. I don't know. There's a lot of things that I see that stand out. But what were you saying about Jed, about his shoulders in particular?
Yeah, and that swing, right, and that pitch in particular, I think is important to point out that none of this stuff happens in a vacuum, right? And so that slider right there is set up by a lot of other pitches, and you can tell by his reaction, he's thinking about guarding the fastball in right there. And then the slider away, he just becomes more vulnerable too. And I think it is important to point out that this is a guy who is highly talented, highly athletic, and has found a way to perform at every level. And this is the hardest part about the big leagues, right? Is that the execution rate at the major league level is the best in the world. That's the whole point. And I think that, he got exposed to major league pitching, and he has the opportunity now to go down, make some adjustments. I don't, the swing in and of itself, I think it's more of a setup, timing, and, commitment than necessarily a full overhaul, because I think, once you start, pushing at one block, right? Like this is Jenga, the whole thing could crumble down. Right. So I think it's minor adjustments that he has to make. I think, I would love to look at a few more swings from the side and see how much momentum he is creating as opposed to torque. Just based on that slider swing, I would assume he would say that's not his A swing. But I do think that, he's creating a lot of momentum towards the pitcher, with his hips, as opposed to creating more torque with his core, which I think is a far more efficient, and repeatable swing to have positive production day in and day out.
I think we have some evidence of what you're talking about here. Here's his stance, where his feet are. So you can see how closed he is. And then the red is where his feet are when the ball intercept happens. And that just, to me, looks like, first of all, his center of mass is drifting forward 10 to 12 inches, like a full foot. That because you can see the red line is where his center of mass is to begin. And just by doing the math, you can see he's moving forward. His center mass is moving 10 or 12 inches forward. So that's a big step forward. His foot in between is going almost over the plate. So it's this large sort of rotational, drifty step forward. And I don't know, like if you just put your feet down like the way that they are in red on this, and try to cover the outside part of the plate, I think you're just always lunging at the outside part of the plate.
Yeah, well, and I would say, the foot pattern here on that photo, I think it could be telling, but I also think that it highly depends to me on that, like the hip movement and how much he's committed to the swing before he's actually recognized a pitch, right? Before he's even seen the pitch, because so if his timing is
that sort of foot movement alone is not problematic.
It could be, right, but once again, like these things aren't to me, they aren't in a vacuum, and I think the timing of it is important, and I think it depends on how much he's committed his center of mass before he's decided to swing, right? And so I think if it's a large stance, so the risk is really high for him to not be able to control that momentum moving forward, right? Because once that momentum is committed forward, it's really hard to stop your hands. Yeah. And so I think that if he's going to have a big stride like that, which, I think you can have success that way. And I think you're going to create a lot more bat speed that way, but it has to be done to me in a way that is creating torque to create the bat speed as opposed to momentum. Because I think if you're just creating the momentum, you are exposing yourself to fastballs in and sliders away. And I think if you look at the last few weeks, as this has played out, any pitch that wasn't a fastball on the black or in off the plate, or a slider that started middle away and ended off the plate, was a mistake. And so I think that with his swing, the way it is and the timing of his swing, I think that he is now he's starting to feel exposed. And I think that is showing up in the swings that he's taking, because he feels exposed based on the execution that's happening at the major league level, because these guys just don't miss as much over the plate as they do in the minor leagues.
I have to say, I'm a little worried that there's this combination of this large step and things that you might say would be to create bat speed. It's like if I saw somebody that had a big bat wrap, so he has 9th percentile bat speed. It's like if I saw somebody that had a big bat wrap, so it's like, pointing the bat really forward to the pitcher, making a big long swing, right, to get more bat speed, and they still had 9th percentile bat speed, then I'd be worried, right? So it's like when I see this big step here and that's 9th percentile bat speed, it doesn't look like it. I know that looks like a fast bat to me, but when it comes down to actually tracking his swings, that's where the worry comes for me. It's like, and that's something that we don't have access to if we're trying to analyze prospects. Teams do, but we don't have access to bat speed, and that could be a crucial part of the analysis, I think. I'm not saying that bat speed is everything, but when you put the bat speed here in the context of a large swing, you're like,
totally.
What are you doing this large swing for if it's not giving you the bat speed you need? So, or is it getting you this much bat speed and it's going to be worse if you quiet it down? That's the Jenga, right? What if he starts quieting it down and now I have 65 mile per hour bat speed, which is not viable in the major leagues?
I think where the scouting comes in, though, is something that Jed was hitting on. It's the wasted energy, the wasted momentum, right?
Correct.
I think it's very hard for me at least, to sit here and say, he can't generate bat speed without that leg kick, without that movement. I think based on the way Shaw's been described by scouts, he's often described as twitchy and explosive. That to me suggests that he has enough strength to generate maybe even more bat speed than he has. And this could be the mechanical flaw causing that bat speed to be as low as it is, rather than functional athleticism.
Yep. Well, and to add on top of that, I think it's a mentality too, right? Like I talked about being exposed, and when you feel exposed, you become more defensive. And when you become more defensive, your bat speed goes down because you're just trying to hit the ball. Right. And so I think
shortening up or whatever.
Yeah. He's shortening his swing now because he feels exposed. And he's like, I just got to hit the ball. Right. But these guys are not, they're not missing. Right. Like it's like he's likely used to seeing more mistakes over the plate that just haven't happened, and they won't happen at the major league level, because if that pitcher doesn't execute, he's being sent down, and so the execution that happens at the major league level is it's like nothing he's ever seen before. And so the mistakes that he's used to being able to dominate, he's not seeing anymore. And so I think that for me, it's really a reset in mentality. It's like, all right, take a deep breath. Let's get more efficient with how we're going to deliver the power that he clearly has, right? Like that you don't fool somebody with the production and or athleticism that you have at the minor leagues, or even in amateur baseball. But now it's about being able to deliver that in an efficient way every day at the major league level.
I think what is interesting, the Cryon is telling me something. It's saying, what is fixable at the MLB level and what requires a demotion? I think in this case, I think a demotion was the right move, because this may be the first time that Shaw has struggled like this. Now, it's not the same for everybody, because Wyatt Langford, I was just talking about this, where I was like, you won the perfect game home run derby. Like, you were the perfect prospect. Like, you did everything. You went to the big college and you destroyed college pitching, and you never really struggled until you got to the major leagues and last April. And that was the first time you got punched in the mouth. And even then he was still like, walking and not striking out. He just wasn't hitting for power. And he found some tweaks. He stood more upright. He made some changes. He made those at the major league level. And they must have spotted something in their conversations with him, or their aptitude with his aptitude for making changes, his willingness to make changes. So you will have guys who come up and have been coached by their father or by, their college coach or whatever, have only had success, tear through the minor leagues, and then I don't want to say they're uncoachable, but they're like, hey man, I know what it works for me. It's worked this whole time. They get to the major leagues, they get punched in the mouth, and they say, okay, now what you got? They're like more receptible to the coaching after that,
The only characteristic that I look for, or that I, even as a teammate, right? Like watching a young player, is resilience, because you are going to fail at the major league level. Right. Nobody goes through a major league career or even a season without failing. And having a year where, you feel like you're doing everything the same and you're not getting the same results, right? Or you come up and, you're not ready, or there's an execution and fewer mistakes that you're used to taking advantage of. And so to me, the resilience of the player, of the individual, is as important as almost anything else, because like I said, you are going to get punched in the mouth. You are going to fail. And to quote my college coach, anybody can play this game when it's going well. Right. And you find out who you really are as a person and as a player when it's not going your way.
But how do you balance that idea of resilience with what I was talking about in terms of being open-minded for coaching? Like, couldn't you be almost too resilient, where you're like, nope, I'm cool. I've been doing it this way for 10 years or 6 years or 8 years. I've been successful all this time. I know this is just this short-term pain, and I will come out victorious on the end. You could be too resilient. Is that possible? Like, just be like, there's nothing I need to change here. There has to be a moment where you're like, maybe I need to change something.
I would
manage that.
Yeah, I would say resilience is different than stubbornness, right? Where like if you are so stubborn that you're not going to, face reality and look at things that you need to do, right, to get better, then yeah, like that. This wouldn't be the first time that's happened, right? Where someone has gone and said like, no, this is the way I've always done it. I'm not going to make any adjustments. And that's somebody who, you wish them the best. But I think resilience to me is different, right? Resilience is like, even if you get knocked down, it's getting back up, right? So it's the willingness, and not only the willingness, but the ability to recognize when you have to make an adjustment or when you have to make a change that will give you the opportunity to produce. So I would view resilience as different than stubbornness. The resilience is more to me like a willingness to go through the process and know that whatever happens, you're going to address it. Like, and that's where I always got my confidence, right? Is like, I knew that I was prepared for whatever today brought me, but tomorrow I knew whether the outcome was good or bad, I was going to be better because of it. Right. So I was ready for the moment, but I was always forward thinking. And that's what gave me my confidence, is I knew I was going to take whatever lesson, good or bad or indifferent, from today and be better tomorrow because of it.
I think that becomes even more difficult, though, when you get to the top level, especially if you're there for the first time and you're being judged on a day-to-day sort of basis. We're talking about 68 plate appearances for Shaw to be demoted, and we're going to expand the conversation beyond Matt Shaw. I mean, we talked all spring about Cam Smith and Christian Campbell and guys that have been pushed pretty aggressively. Campbell played well at every stop last year, so I think his ascent to the big leagues is more in the current prove it at every level and get the opportunity, whereas Cam Smith and the Astros are doing something we've seen that the Angels have done. They're being very aggressive. This is a guy that was drafted last summer, barely played in the minor leagues. They acquired him in the Kyle Tucker trade, and now he's out there, I would say, holding his own. Like, I think how you define success is going to vary depending on the point of the career you're in. Like for Cam Smith, he's 47 plate appearances in, 25% K rate, 214, 298, 333 line, 89 WRC plus. He's surviving. You can have a player like that in the bottom third of your lineup as long as you like the quality of the at-bats, you like the swing decisions. You don't feel like he's overmatched and losing confidence. And I think that's probably the difference, is if you feel like that player is grinding and not coming back with the right mental space to get back into their old productive ways, then I think that's when you make that demotion decision. So how do you balance the patience that you want to have, like getting the timing right of a promotion, and team needs? Because the Astros clearly needed to give Cam Smith an opportunity to begin this season. I would say so far it's going well enough to keep going with it.
Yeah, I think, and this is the guy that they traded one of the, better hitters in the league to acquire Cam Smith. And so they're clearly building their future around this kid. And by all accounts, that's a smart decision. You just, for a 22-year-old to come up with a total of, how many at-bats in the minor leagues, to expect him to come out and be a dominant force, I think that would be unfair by all of us to expect that out of him. If it happens, he's, it's just like savant, right? I just, competing against the best in the world as a 22-year-old is, in and of itself, is impressive, and, kind of holding your own. But once again, I think it's taking the lessons from today and finding a way to improve them to be even more prepared tomorrow. So I would say that Cam is doing a good job. I should probably watch some more of his at bats, but I just think, objectively looking at the numbers, I think that he's showing that he's got the ability to do it. And he's obviously done that in spring training at the minor leagues. But he's a young kid that's going to have to continue to make these adjustments as well. And we talked about this. It just depends on where the organization is and the timing. And, if they're going to let, how confident they are in the kid's personality to let him fail. How does that affect the kid and the mentality moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like things have changed so much though since you were coming up in Boston. I'm looking at your minor league stats, and there was no reason to slow you down. I mean, your first level above league average right off the bat at 22 in high A. 2007, you're 49% better than league average, but you still got 408 plate appearances in Double A. I feel like in today's game, that's when you debut, is 2007, after, I don't know, 200, 300 plate appearances in Double A, where you're 49% better than league average, and then major league team is like, hey, why is he there? Let's have him up in the big leagues. But no, you finished 400 plate appearances in 2007 in Double A, and then started AAA, got 177, and then you got another 234. So you got 400 plate appearances at every level before you debuted with Boston. And I just feel like, because the minor leagues is smaller, because of some of these rules that incentivize, hey, if you are, in the major leagues and you get a top 3 finish in Rookie of the Year, like there's incentives for the teams, because the minor leagues are smaller. Just in general, I think that we also think that we can know how good a player is a little bit better, because now we say, oh, we're tracking his bat speed. We know this, we know this. It's like with pitch grades, we know his stuff plus, so he's ready for the big leagues or he's not. But I do see some players, especially on the pitching side, I see young pitchers come up who've, all their stuff plus is optimized, but they don't really know how to put together, their arsenal in a competitive environment where the win is all that matters, So I do wonder, there's this balance between developing them, but they're developing in a space where the win doesn't matter. So they're developing sometimes in a space where it's like, hey, how good were my exit velocities today? How good were my launch angles? Did I get some blasts? All that stuff. Did I do the right stuff plus? And then you get to the big leagues and it's like, no, you have to battle. So I wonder if you think we're losing something a little bit by rushing these kids, or if really the big leagues is where you need to figure it all out anyway.
Yeah, I mean, what isn't wrapped up in those overall statistics is my first year in Double A, or my year in Double A. The first month of the season, I think I was hitting 150, and so I went through a period of objective failure, right? Where it was I remember specifically, my Double A manager, Arnie Baylor, having a team meeting and, talking about, where we were, and, we were not performing well as a team either. Right. And I think Arnie was very much a guy that he wanted to win. And so I think there was this balance, more of a balance then too, of winning at the minor league level, and especially with the prospects that we had on that team. It was learning how to play together, learning how to win. And I remember specifically in this meeting, he was talking about, the quote unquote scholarship, right? Where we had some bonus babies on that team. And, I think that bought some of us more runway to fail. But I remember specifically, and it felt like he was talking directly to me, even though it was the group, where it was that scholarship doesn't last forever. Right. And so, I like I said, I remember, I don't know how many at bats it was to start the year, but it had to have been at least 100, maybe a few more, where I was not in a good place. And, thinking to myself, gosh, I don't know if this is right for me. I don't know if I'm good enough to do this. And and even in A-ball, right? Like I remember looking in the mirror a couple of times, waking up like, I don't know if this lifestyle is right for me. I don't know if this is too hard for me, because you go to your first even minor league season and you are playing every single day.
Yeah, it's not like college at all. College is like, I play on the weekends.
Literally. And you're like going back to your dorm and hanging out with your buddies. Like this is, minor league dudes who they're all there because they all, have the opportunity to play in the major leagues and make a career out of it and do something very cool and very fun. And it's ultra competitive. And like I said, I had multiple moments, particularly my first full season in Wilmington, and then the next year in Double-A. And I also got hurt and missed a fair amount of time my first year or my first full season. But I remember specific, like I said, I don't think I'll ever forget that team meeting where, Arnie was telling us that, your scholarship doesn't last forever, that you have to start producing. And so I worked through some struggles in the minor leagues, learning how to perform day in and day out.
I think that's just a good reminder that player development is not linear. I think we want every player to come into the minor leagues, figure out each level, be above average, well above average at every level, come to the big leagues and figure it out quickly. And that's not what happens. The fail points are all over the place for a variety of different reasons, with extra variables like health folded in. And I think minor league injuries are still pretty underreported. Not a lot of full-time beat writers covering teams in the minors. So that information ends up staying between player and organization. Maybe in some cases, players are keeping it to themselves because they're just trying to survive every day. So I think...
Yeah, there's a Stanford player who had surgery that it's not been reported. That nobody knows that there's a Stanford player who's had surgery. I don't even know because he's from Palo Alto. It's pretty strange.
It happens sometimes, right? So I just think we all need to continually recalibrate our own expectations. And I think what happens to me, at least, is when I see a great group of rookies come in, a couple guys that hit the ground running, figure it out quickly in their rookie season, I think it kind of subconsciously elevates expectations for the next group. And it's not fair because everybody is on their own timetable. So we're going to take a look at 3 hitters that I think kind of illustrate this pretty effectively. We had a mailbag question earlier in the week in our Discord. We're going to fold a bunch of names in here. We want to talk about Ben Rice, Tyler Soderstrom, and Spencer Torkelson. And you have 2 first-rounders, a guy in Torkelson who went 1-1, and then Rice being the completely unique player of the bunch, just a late rounder out of Dartmouth. He was a 12th round pick in 2021, a guy that by where he was drafted rarely makes the big leagues, right? Expectations are about as low as they can be once you're a 12th round draft pick. And all 3 of these guys are clicking right now. Torkelson's had success in the big leagues before. Second half of 2023 was phenomenal. That whole season was solid overall, but he really kind of figured it out. It seemed like then took a step back in 2024. Looks like maybe he's made some more adjustments. So where do we want to begin here? Who's the most intriguing to you of this group as far as changes they have made since we saw them a year ago?
To some extent, I was surprised when I was looking at the stats for these guys that they haven't really, as a group, done anything that's really obviously different. Like their ground ball fly ball mixes are not that different from last year. Their chase rates not that different. If anything, I could say that they've gotten a little better at hitting the ball hard in the air. One thing that 2 of these guys have in common, though, Ben Rice and Spencer Torkelson both opened up more. And I wanted to ask Jed about this because if you look here at Spencer Torkelson's feet, with the stance tool that they've got, he's further back, although the back foot is that's illegal. But he's closed his stance up a little bit, and he's more open. Now, when you can actually click when you should check this stuff out. It's kind of cool. But if you click along, you can see the feet move. And for both Torkelson and Rice, their feet end in the same place they did last year. It is begin in a different place. And so I wanted to ask, Jed, like, what do you think of like when somebody's opening up, but they still sort of land in the same place? What are they trying to do? Are they trying to put more eyes on the ball? Like, are they trying to just see it better? Are they trying to create momentum one way or the other? What do you think of when somebody's opening up just generally?
Yeah, I mean, I think there could be a number of different reasons why you would do it, but and this goes back to that, the Jenga block, right? There's all these interconnected things that, like, you make one adjustment and it affects something else. But I think with Torkelson in particular, I got to imagine that he probably feels like a little bit more of an open stance. In my estimation, allows his hips to clear a little bit more, right? And so as long as he's able to stay on plane, right, meaning create a good entry point to the ball and like be efficient to the ball, if you can clear your hips a little bit more and create more of the torque, then that you're going to increase your bat speed. You're going to increase the time that you can actually let the ball travel. So you're seeing the ball better. Your chase rate in theory would go down. So I like I said, there could be a lot of things, and speculating, it would be, to open up would be to clear your hips a little bit more and try to create a little bit more torque for Torkelson.
Yeah, it's aptly named. But one thing that's true about all these guys is premium bat speed that they've sort of capitalized on better this year. So I think it's tempting to want to like be like, this is the thing that made them break out, and so I want to be like, oh, they both opened up, but Soderstrom didn't open up. He's got the same stance that he had before. And to some extent, I think it's maybe it's about like finding the A swing time to do the A swing. So some of it might be anticipation of like, oh, I know now what pitchers are trying to do to me. And so therefore I know when to put the A swing off, because all these guys have premium bat speed. And to some extent, this was predictable. Torkelson, to me, I don't know what your read is on him, it's just been really up and down, and it's been streaky to the nth degree. I mean, he had that great second half in 2023 where he ends up with 31 homers, and then 2024 he hits 219 with 10 homers in 381 plate appearances, and it's just seems completely lost. And I don't know how someone can look as good as he looks at times and look as bad as he looks at times.
It's this game is hard, and it's constant adjustment. I'll refer back to my point of resilience, right? And I think there's a maturation process, right? Like, he comes in 2023. Granted, 2022 he had a lot of at bats. He clearly made an adjustment to be able to hit more home runs, but still didn't, it's not like he had, he still got, it looks like he got on bases, his on base percentage relative to his batting average was good, 313 OBP versus a 233 batting average. So, it's still walking enough, but I think a lot of this is a maturation process where he is learning at the big league level, what he can and can't handle, right? In terms of, like, to your point, getting your A swing off, knowing situationally when the right time to do that, but then also recognizing the pitches that he's able to do that on. So I think that process, that I talked about, me in the minor leagues doing it in A-ball and AA, he's doing it in the big leagues. He's at 23. I think I made my debut just before my 24th birthday. So those adjustments that I was making in the minor leagues, where, I'm 22 and 23 years old, he's doing it at the big league level against the best pitchers in the world that are going to execute, better than anybody else.
Yeah. I think we might actually have some evidence about this idea of multiple swings and figuring out when to do it. I think it comes with Ben Rice in particular. Here are Ben Rice's swing charts. So last year in 2024, he's swinging dead red, right? He's just like, if it's down the middle, this is already, I like it a little bit, right? 2024 on the left, I like that a little bit. That's saying, hey, man, this guy's got a great sense of where the zone is, and he's pretty disciplined, and he's just going to swing it middle, basically, right? Maybe with 2 strikes, he'll swing low just to foul something off, but he wants middle. I kind of like the 2025 swing chart a little bit better, because now he's got two swing areas. And what that says to me is probably he's got an A and a B swing. He's got the A swing. What I'm reading off of this, he's got the A swing where he can pull that inside pitch for homers, right? And he's got the B swing where he's going to push that outside pitch for doubles, basically. Yeah. So anyway, I see a maturation of process that comes out in these heat maps, and I wonder if you see the same thing when you see something as simple as a swing heat map like this.
Yeah, what I see is the guy on the left is hunting mistakes, right?
Yeah.
And waiting for that pitch that's right down the middle. And at the minor league level, you're going to get those mistakes. You're going to get those pitches over the plate eventually. The big league level, there are times where you go through an entire game and you might not get a pitch that you could drive that day. Like you're just like that pitcher is executing against you. Maybe they're game planning against you. And you're not going to get a pitch that you can drive. And so, not every single pitch in the major leagues, like they're setting you up too, right? So like they're working through at bats, like we talked about earlier at the minor league level. When you're developing, that's the same for the pitchers too. They're trying to work on their pitch mix and how they can execute. At the big league level, they're trying to set you up for the next pitch. And there's times where, quite frankly, you're not going to get that pitch that you're waiting for. And so if you're sitting there waiting for that mistake down the middle of the plate, you could be standing there with your bat in your hand for a long time and strike out.
I'm going to put the Torkelson heat map up here too. And I think what's interesting for me with Torkelson is when he was going good in 2023, he was handling fastballs kind of the same way he is right now. Something changed with fastballs, probably where they were being located last year. Maybe mechanically something fell apart on him too. But it's interesting. It seems like he's doing a lot more damage away right now, or at least trying to do more damage away.
And his pull rate's really up. So
yeah,
he's pulling those pitches. He's pulling those outside high pitches.
Which then makes me think, okay, what would be the adjustment? If you're pulling outside pitches more consistently, what did you do? Did you get closer to the plate? Like what kind of other adjustment could make that possible?
Yeah. And so I think, when you talk about opening your stance like that, like we did, like clearly he has the ability to handle the outside pitch in that, like, especially with that heat map. And so by opening a stance, he's also giving himself a better chance to get to the inside pitch more efficiently. So if he's naturally able to get to the outside pitch, which I think that, if you look at that heat map from last year and even this year, his tendency is to be able to take that pitch middle away and do damage on it. But where he may have been more exposed is on the inside pitch. So I see a guy opening up as a way, like I said, to, as I said earlier, create more torque to get to the inside pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at his strikeout rates inside last year, down and in, 35% K rate, up and in, 26%. He's not getting beat there early on this year. It's always hard to take a few weeks and say, okay, is this a real adjustment that's sticky and sustainable, or is it just what a hot streak looks like? I mean, there's always the possibility of the latter, but this does look like some pretty conscious adjustments that have helped him close up a hole and made him a bit less vulnerable. Tyler Soderstrom, probably just the best case of all, where it's just building upon what he did last year. We talked about him during draft season as a guy that made a ton of hard contact, was striking out less. He's doing that even more. Like, I think when you're looking at the Fangraphs page, the Savant page, it's easier to tell yourself the story of Tyler Soderstrom's early improvements being maybe the most impactful. I'm curious if what we see with our eyes sort of matches what we're seeing in the numbers so far with Soderstrom.
Soderstrom, just like, he's a little bit different than the other guys. I could not find like a stance change. Watching him, I thought he looked about the same. But there is something going on with, he's the one who has improved his chase rate.
Mm-hmm.
And he's improved his chase rate by just swinging less. He was swinging 50% of the time, basically 23 and 24. Now he's down to 42% of the time. And that has taken all of his numbers down. This is selective aggression. I think it's working really well for him. Now, what we found is that chase rate by itself is not super predictive at a lot of stuff, but zone minus chase is predictive. And what's interesting is just by swinging less, he's swinging less in the zone and he's swinging less outside the zone. So this is not just an unqualified, like, oh, he's got better at the plate. It's just he's more passive and it's working out for him. It could be used against him if they fill him up with strikes. But if they fill him up with strikes, that's what he wants. Like he'll eventually get the pitches he wants. So I just think this is maybe a maturation of approach in terms of just swinging less and waiting for the right pitches to swing at and maybe having confidence in it.
Yeah, I think all those, and I think you nailed it, right? Like it's selective aggression. I think we have to remember that baseball is inherently reactive, right? It is. We call it offense, but it's the only sport outside of cricket where the offense doesn't control the ball. The pitcher's the one with the ball. They're dictating the game. As a hitter, we're more of the defensive back, right? Like you're covering the receiver. So it is inherently a defensive or reactive athletic endeavor. And so at that same moment where you are, reactive, you can't be defensive. And so that's where this selective aggression comes in, is that if you're just going up there swinging as hard as you can at every single pitch and hoping you hit it, that's not a recipe for long-term success.
But you also pointed out, if you're going up there, it's just standing there, you're not going to get success either.
Yeah. And that's my point, right? Like that's where the aggression comes in, and that's where these young players are learning what pitches inside the zone that they are able to drive, and they're starting to execute on that and understanding what they are capable of as players in terms of pitches. Like you're just, if you go up there and you think that you're going to hit a home run on every single pitch, you're going to be wildly disappointed.
Yeah, I think that's reflected in Ben Rice's numbers last year. Like I think he's the best example when you look at that heat map of going, wait, he was just like too patient. You have to find other ways to do damage. You have to have multiple spots in the zone where you can do something. Because if you're only looking for the long ball, and maybe that might be an oversimplification of Ben Rice's approach. Maybe it was simply just working the count for the ball he really wanted to drive. It was just being too patient, too passive, not saying, I can do something else here if I take a swing a little earlier. I think that's what was happening to him last year.
Yeah. And just, I think recognizing too, a pitch that when you do get that mistake, or when you do get, something that's over the plate, that you're ready for it, but at the same time, not just standing there waiting for, or not standing there looking to walk. I've never played with a successful major league hitter that steps up to the plate looking to walk. Right. A walk at the big league level is a byproduct of you being aggressive and quite frankly, scaring a pitcher out of the zone. Because if the pitcher doesn't respect you enough to go out of the zone, he's just going to pound the zone until you prove otherwise, right? That you are capable of doing damage, and that they are going to be, they're going to be more cautious with you. And, that ultimately, when that mentality gets to the point where the pitcher gets too concerned about it, that's when they make their mistakes. But if they don't respect you, if the pitcher doesn't respect you, then they're gonna be more aggressive. They're gonna let it eat more and be even more aggressive against you.
As far as these three guys go, if you're trying to rank them, long-term success as a hitter, based on what you've seen up to this point in their respective careers, how would you rank them 1, 2, and 3?
I'm gonna go with Soderstrom first, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I'll say that just from an age perspective too, right?
Yeah.
So that
draft pedigree. I mean, yes, Torkelson has that draft pedigree, but Soderstrom also has draft pedigree,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe that shouldn't matter with Ben Rice. Maybe Ben Rice is just a collection of attributes at this point. We don't need to worry about where he was drafted or what his backstory was, but his age, he's closer to his peak, just by virtue of his age. So there's not a lot of growth potential necessarily left past what he's doing right now, because he's 26.
Yeah,
right.
And to me, like that, I agree wholeheartedly that in terms of like where you're peaking, and then it's just a matter of sustain, right? Just being able to sustain an approach and really identify who you are as a major leaguer, right? And Ben Rice is, could be by all accounts a very productive major league player for a very long time if he figures out who he is in any given year and is that player, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're a manager writing a lineup, you want to know who you're putting into that lineup every single day. And so if I can trust you to be that guy every single day, at the end of the season, I'm going to look up and know that I got the production that I expected.
And that honestly, that is what tempts me to maybe put Rice second, is because I just feel like Spencer Torkelson has really struggled with his identity as a player. I think that's what I've seen over the years.
I don't think a lot of those are probably personal expectations, right? You're drafted 1-1. You make your major league debut as a 22-year-old, like. He probably thought that he needed to step in and be Miguel Cabrera as a 22-year-old, right? And so a lot of that is personal expectation. So I think, he's failed enough at this point that he has the confidence. I would assume has the confidence to know who he is as a player now. And I assume he'll continue to refine that approach and understand it even more intimately. And if he does, I think he can continue to be continue this type of production that he's had early in the season. But I think it's really about establishing that identity and understanding who you are as a major league player.
And I think the main thing for me, very analog analysis on the way out the door, Tyler Soderstrom getting that K rate down under 20%. That's something that I'm not sure Spencer Torkelson's ever going to do. I think that's the separator between those two. I think it's interesting that Eno is entertaining Ben Rice versus Torkelson as more of a toss-up, though, in the long run. I think that might surprise a few people out there. But thank you to Met for suggesting that question in our Discord.
And one thing that all three of these guys did that stood out for me when I was looking at last year was they hit the ball hard last year. So this was about, the things that we were talking about are small stance refinements when it comes to maybe adjustments in their approach, what they're swinging at, what they're trying to do, A swing, B swing. It all comes from a foundation of they could already hit the ball hard. So when I look at, just to bring this, full circle to some of the other guys we talked about, when I look at Cam Smith right now, it's not super exciting in terms of some of the components. Oh, he's striking out a little bit too much. He's not barreling the ball. Why isn't he? He's hit the ball 111 already. Cam Smith is already somebody that could take this leap next year. We may not be this year, but maybe next year when we're talking about what's going on with Torkelson and Soderstrom and stuff, maybe it's next year we're thinking this about Cam Smith. And I did a real quick thing where I looked at guys under 25 and under who've hit the ball hard and have struggled. Jordan Walker did that last year, and now Jordan Walker's kind of showing us a little bit more of what he can do. Guys who haven't really yet put it together yet, but could in the future, that could be in a future episode like this for us, I think, are John Kensky Noel, who obviously hits the ball super, super hard. Obviously has strikeout issues, but could be an adjustment away. Brett Beatty has hit the ball 113. We know that he's had trouble lifting the ball, but if you hit the ball 113, maybe you just focus on hitting line drives. I think there could still be something in Brett Beatty. And then finally, nearer to the bottom of the list, and a surprise entry on this, Graham Pauley has hit a ball harder this year than Spencer Torkelson. And I know that it doesn't look like it's going to go anywhere, but he's also going to get a lot of runway in in Miami this year. And I wouldn't count Grant Pauly out completely.
Yeah. And I, just my final thought on all this is ultimately is just pitch selection, right? If you're swinging at pitches that you should be swinging at, and you're coming from a place that has this high upside, then the results I could buy into future results. But I think the basis of all this is pitch selection for production at the major league level.
That's a puzzle. It takes a lot of guys plenty of time to solve it. As long as you keep getting those opportunities, you can have that chance to be even one of those late breakout players, as we were discussing a little earlier in the show. We are going to go on our way out the door. A reminder, you can join our Discord with the link in the show description. If you do Instagram stuff, Jed's over there, just Jed Lowrie. If you do Bluesky, is Sarris.bsky.social. I am dvr.bsky.social. Thanks to our producer, Brian Smith, for putting this episode together. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Thursday.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.